of the entire population of Iceland.
Yes. So welcome to Reykjavik, Iceland. And today we're going to talk about the Icelandic genealogy database called Íslendingabók. My name is Valur and I'm your friend in Reykjavik. And with me is the co-founder of Íslendingabók, Friðrik Skúlason. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're gonna have a little bit of a chat about what is Íslendingabók, who can access it, how far can we trace back our ancestors, and we were actually having a fun discussion about that. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. And Friðrik, you can see it on the right-hand side of the bar. That you can see comments flowing there, and I will also pinpoint them for us, so it will drop there in the bottom so we can answer any questions. So Íslendingabók, it's the first origins of Íslendingabók. It's a database that you built like 1988, right?
Not a database as such. What I built in '88 was basically a genealogy program. I then used it to create my own personal database, which I sort of intended eventually to cover the whole nation. Estimated to be a 50-year project, and thought I would possibly finish it when I was sitting in a retirement home or something like that.
Okay, so so it was going to be like a hobby for you to do that, and
a lifetime project or something like that. I mean, the thing is, genealogy is sort of the national, or has been considered the national hobby of Icelanders.
Yes.
And I mean, that applies to many of my own ancestors as well. And nothing unusual about that. The unusual thing was what happened was that I was really the first to come up with the idea of computerizing the whole nation and putting it in a single database.
Yes.
There was
So if we take you back a little bit, and just think about the people. 1988, you started probably programming before that, right? But it was released in 1988. So MS, like the Windows, the first operation database was 1986, or.
Yeah, well, things were a little bit different back then. I mean, keep in mind we are talking about the age of DOS programs.
Yes.
We are 640 We have 640 kilobytes of memory, and
you had floppy disk. You were programming on a floppy disk.
I had a hard disk. I had an advanced system. Yeah.
You're of course a very advanced. You were way beyond in front of your common people at the time. So 1988. It's called Espolín, right? The first.
Named after one of the three big genealogists of 200 years ago.
Okay. Icelandic?
Jón Espolín, or actually Jón Friðrik Skúlason. His middle name was the same as my first name.
Okay. So is he probably your ancestor? Or?
No.
Okay. So I didn't know about that guy, but so it's very common here in Iceland for you folks. I see Alexa and Ayla and Stephen and Svava. It's very common for us, and especially when I was growing up, we were asked, "Hverra manna ertu?" Hverra manna ertu? And that basically is, who's your parents and what your family is. That was like a very common greeting. First, what's your name? Hverra manna ertu? Who's your next of kin?
Yeah.
So we are.
You could usually answer it with just stating the region you were from. My mother's family is from the Westfjords, and my father is from Rangárvallasýsla.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
or farms, you could. I'm related to the north from Bakki or Oxnadal or something on the Bakkasel or something like that.
Thing is, of course, that if the person you were talking to happened to have any knowledge of that area, you would get more detailed question. So are you related to so and so of that particular farm or something like that?
I don't know how many times I've been asked the question. I'm from the Westman Islands. So that's this one and this one and this one, and that's a very common thing for us Icelanders. So what do you think is why are we so obsessed with genealogy? Why are we so obsessed with our ancestry? We were a poor farming society for centuries and really not very noteworthy in the history books. Why is it such a...
Well, there are reasons, different reasons at different times. I mean, around the 1100, 1200, genealogy was popular because Icelanders were losing our status as a real independent country. We were eventually forced to become subjects of the Norwegian king, but we, or the people of that time, could still trace their ancestry back to what they felt was heroes and nobility and the kings of the Viking era and so on. So it was a part of personal pride.
Yeah. So just to let our foreign friends know, we're referring to the saga episode, or when we were writing the sagas, Icelandic sagas, and the history of Norwegian kings, and we called one of our most pride things is the saga nation, and also just our Viking ancestry. Egill Skallagrímsson, the worst drunkard in Icelandic history, that was
also known as a famous poet and homicidal maniac, but that's
I was actually just for fun, just tracing back my ancestry, and of course Egill Skallagrímsson is a ancestor of ours, but that an ancestor of mine.
That explains things.
So we were talking about it earlier. So I had fun. I'm going to show you guys now. So this is called Íslendingabók today. We're getting a little bit ahead of time, but you can basically trace back your ancestry. You can put if you have an Icelandic social security number, you can put it into the database, and you can basically trace back your ancestors back to Viking era. And I put 3 noteworthy names into the database, and I could trace my family to Egill Skallagrímsson, the worst drunk, and like Friðrik was saying, a homicidal maniac. Part of my ancestry. And Ingólfur Arnarson, the first settler, he goes back 31. Back 31. What's the right
generations?
Yeah, generations. Yeah, of course. 31 generations. Egill Skallagrímsson is 29 generations, and Snorri Sturluson, the famous writer of the Poetic Edda, and I can trace back my ancestry to him, 23 generations. And then we were just talking about that the most what was the phrase?
Most recent common ancestor.
Most recent common ancestry. Yeah, that's the okay.
The point is that prior to the 20th century, there was hardly any immigration at all in Iceland. I mean, a few Danish merchants and so on, but most of the people are mostly descended from the same group of original settlers. And that means that we all share ancestors, and we're all descended from the same people the further back you go. And the question was, for a long time, who is the person closest to the present? Who is the ancestor of the entire nation? Well, again, excluding recent immigrants and people and others that don't have any Icelandic ancestry at all, but of the common ancestor of all of the whole population. And the answer turned out to be rather interesting. Because the most recent common ancestor of the entire nation is a Catholic bishop.
At the time, they were not allowed to have babies, right?
Yeah, but I mean, this is Iceland. The winters are dark and the nights are cold, and you really need something to keep you warm.
Yes.
And he had a mistress, and they had 5 or 6 children.
I know his fate was that he was beheaded with his two sons. That was the end of Catholicism in Iceland. So that's the end of our common ancestor.
Well, I mean, of course, he had grandchildren by that time, and I mean, he managed somehow to acquire quite a lot of money, and they were among the wealthiest people in Iceland, owned a lot of farms and so on, and their ancestry is really well documented, which of course is partly why it's so easy to trace from current people back to them.
Mm-hmm. So let's not get let's go back again. So you were doing Espolin, this program that you were just a hobby time for you to trace back your ancestry, or just
I mean, I wrote a program for basically keeping track. Keep in mind, at that time I was already writing software for a living. The year before, in '87, I had written a program that was a spelling checker for Icelandic.
It's still going on, right? Pookie.
Oh yeah, it is. It's one of the longest living programs that I know of. Of course, it looks totally different from what it did back then, but it's fundamentally the same.
For those of you that are learning Icelandic, then maybe you'd pick up that software. It's called Pookie or Devil or Goblin or
something like that. It's there's an old folk. It relates to an old folk tale, which is really not the subject. I could talk about that forever. So that's really off topic.
Are you talking about Simon the Frothy, or are you talking about or Pookie or Púlpitunum or?
The thing known as Prentvillapúkin.
Prentvillapúkin,
yeah.
The spelling goblin or spelling.
Yeah. The thing is, if there were spelling mistakes in a book, people would blame it on the spelling imp or spelling goblin or whatever. The way I presented it as, we got him under control, and he is working for us now, so you just
organized him for the greater good.
Yeah, but anyhow, that was in '87. In '88, I started working on this just to basically keep track of my own genealogical data and my family history and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I had looked at some other DOS programs, ancestry programs from elsewhere, but they were just totally unsuitable for Icelandic. I mean, they made basic assumptions like family names. Mm-hmm. You had to have a family name.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the case here. Also, one of the programs did not allow you to enter children unless the parents were married.
Okay.
Which is completely and totally impractical in Iceland.
Yes, it's very common in Iceland to have children out of wedlock.
So, but couples typically get married by the time they have the second child. It's easier than,
But also, we also had quite unique situation here. Being an island, we had a lot of information about. What did you base the database, or when you finally started writing it? We had so much information about we have a book of settlements talking about the original settlers of Iceland, the Íslendingabók, the Icelandic sagas, and then you would go for more. You would reach out for church records and whatnot.
Well, actually, there's an interesting pointed in the comments that I would like to respond to later, Heather. But never mind. Let me answer this first. The thing is, I'm just
going to pin it here so we can ask.
Okay, let me first answer the other question.
Yeah.
As I said, originally Icelanders wrote about their family because of, I guess, personal pride and so on. Then, around maybe 1500 or so, genealogy became popular again, but for an extremely different reason. It was after the Black Death. Black Death wiped out a very big chunk of the population. Mm-hmm. And what happened there? Inheritance issues. it became a big issue. Who was meant to inherit what after whom? I mean, your brothers and sisters were dead. All your cousins were dead. Your second cousins were dead.
How many died? Was it half of the nation, or was it 2/3?
We had actually two big plagues, but one in, I think, 1403 or 1405 or something like that killed.
It was half of that.
Yes, we don't really have the documentation, because one of the groups that were pretty much wiped out was the let's call it the educated part of the population, all the monks, all the priests, and so on, because they couldn't just isolate in their homes and so on. They had to attend. I mean, there was no. They couldn't practice social distancing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But anyhow, and then later on we have genealogy manuscripts that take us to the 1800s. We have census records from, well, the oldest one is 1681, partial, but the first full one is in 1703.
Yeah,
then we have church records.
That's the first census of a whole nation in the world.
Yeah, well,
ladies and gentlemen,
of the whole nation, yes, there are older censuses. I think one in Quebec. There are regional censuses in China that include a lot more people and a much bigger area, but they are not the whole nation. So this is really remarkable for being a whole nation and including everybody, even the beggars, the people that are just traveling around.
So, for you out there, we try to take from the late 13th century to the 17th century or something like that. There's not many noteworthy things. Not well. Iceland is not the most poor nation in Europe. So we take all our gold that we have from our history and try to lift it up. So just want to say that.
But the point is really, and then of course in present times we have the national registry and so on. And this means that for any single person in Iceland today, you will have, and I'm not saying the complete ancestry, not in all cases, but pretty much everybody back to the 1600s, and then some branches going back to the settlement. And of course, a part of the population, which brings me to the comment here, a good chunk of the population emigrated in around 1874 and a bit after that. And for two different reasons, one being a really nasty volcano, and the second being the midwives. It's all their fault.
Yeah. Sorry? Midwives?
The immigration people. The midwives are really the ones who are to blame for the immigration, because Iceland has around 5,000 farms. Each farm can support like 10 people on the average. They are small farms, so you were basically limited to 50,000 people in the country. The country doesn't support in not a farm but just by farming. What happened in the mid 19th century, around 1850, was that the Danish king was worried that the infant mortality rate in Iceland was so much higher than in Denmark. So he issued an order. There is to be an educated midwife in every parish around the country. What happened? Infant mortality dropped like a rock. What happens then, 25 years later? You got a shitload of people of marrying age with no prospects.
Yes.
They may have found their special one or whatever, but they couldn't get a farm. They couldn't. In order to be allowed to marry, you basically had to have. You were expected to have a farm of you, or at least something of the equivalent of 10 sheep or something like that.
Yeah, for you guys, so we were. It's very strange that we were really a strict farming society for centuries. We really didn't use the fishing resources around us for quite, for centuries. We fished for our own consumption, but we didn't use it for export. We were a farming society, and there were strict laws that you needed to own a farm to be basically a legible man. You can, like Friðrik was saying, you couldn't marry, you couldn't unless you had a farm, and there were quite severe demands of what you had to own to be able to. So the strong farmers, they really had a stranglehold on the Icelandic community. So, but it's a very interesting thing that you were saying about the midwives, and I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, and then of course we got this volcanic eruption in 1873 or something like that, which was devastating to the northeastern part of the country.
It caused famine, and
it would have been devastating to international flights if there had been any at that time. But that's besides the point. Yeah. The thing is, those two things together prompted a whole lot of people to emigrate to mostly to Canada. And they settled, well, basically across Canada. Of course, different places. The center, of course, is Gimli, and the other settlements in the north of Winnipeg.
Winnipeg, and but also in U.S., the north.
Centered around the mountain in North Dakota.
Yeah, it's really strange coming from such a cold and barren country to go straight for the cold again. It's mind-boggling.
The idea was that they knew what to do. They would know what to do. They would be able to handle it. You wouldn't send people from Spain there or whatever.
I understand the people that went to Brazil, but I don't understand the people that went to Canada. But okay, sorry.
It was partly about land. In Canada, you could get land. That was free or cheap, but in Iceland there was a land shortage. There were those 5,000 farms. That's it. And keep in mind, towns and settlements bigger settlements were just starting to form. The total population of the biggest town was maybe a few hundred people.
Yeah,
it really didn't start to grow until around the same time. And late 19th century is when the population finally started to grow above the 50,000, where it had been stuck for centuries. And then, of course, it exploded at the beginning of the 20th century. But that's a different issue.
Yeah. That, we started fishing then for real, and then then we had more money, and then. That was kind of like the beginning of when Iceland became an affluent country, when we started to fish and export, and I'm always mind-boggled by how long we struggled trying to farm and keep the farming ways, and how strong the farming community had still in the 20th century really a stranglehold on many things in Iceland. It's just strange.
But I think we're getting a bit off topic, because all this we were talking about how this all got started, and as I said, I was just doing this as my own personal hobby, basically a 50-year a planned 50-year project, or something like that. Then a person named Kári Stefánsson came to Iceland, and he was going to start a company here, specializing in genetics, specifically the research into the genetic components of diseases, not genes or genetic flaws causing diseases, but maybe things like, if you have this particular mutation on that particular chromosome, you are 25% more likely to get a heart attack. Stuff like that. And in order to be able to do that, he needed information about the genealogy of people, and he also needed biological samples, but that's not my headache.
Yeah.
Anyhow, he came to me, and basically he said, I need this kind of database. I cannot wait 50 years for it. You have 5 years. How much money do you need? To make a really long story short, we ended up hiring between 20 and 30 people to work on my hobby for me. And we got this finished. Then we put it on the web, which is actually, we are kind of legally required to do, because Iceland has very strict privacy laws, much stricter than the US or Canada for that, or at least much stricter than the US. But the thing is, anybody who maintains a database with personal information, and quite frankly, it doesn't get much more personal than this, is legally required to give people or tell people what information we are storing about them. So we basically solved that by offering people to look at or get access to the database, look at themselves, look at their relatives and so on. And of course, it also means that we are getting 250,000 people to error check this for us for free, which is a side benefit for us.
Isn't it 2/3 of the population registered?
Yes, something like that. Actually, this is the single most popular database in the world per capita. As most of you may have heard, Iceland has a world record of having world records per capita.
Yes, one of our most pride things. But so you had 20 people working working on the database, and you finished it. When was it launched?
It's 18 years ago, I think. Yeah, 18.
Okay, 18 years. And so there are two ways of using it. You can basically, if you have an Icelandic social security number, you can log into your and see.
It doesn't quite work like that.
Okay.
Okay, we are getting into some legal issues here, but one, the Privacy Commission in Iceland basically forces us to take every reasonable precaution to make sure that only the right individual has access to his or her information. Second, there are restrictions on transferring the information outside Iceland, which unfortunately is why we let's just say that there are restrictions on what we can do for people of Icelandic ancestry in US and Canada. I've been trying to help by answering questions, putting them in contact with relatives and so on, but we cannot give them full access to the database. Sorry, not going to happen.
But those people, they can reach out and ask questions.
That's perfectly possible. I mean, we do that all the time. There is this project called Snorri project, for example. We have been working together with the Snorri project, which is mostly for people in Canada to connect with their relatives in Iceland. I'm not sure if it extends to the US as well, but at least in Canada. And we have been doing some work there to basically, as I said, help them to find their relatives.
Okay.
And
but you have difficulties with in the US and I think Canada, they have closed like the church records for 100 years.
Well, Canada has a 100-year rules on censuses. Censuses are not open until 100 years have passed since they were taken. We don't have any rules like that in Iceland. In the US, some people are rather paranoid about what they consider to be private information about them being published without their knowledge. The thing is, even things like social security numbers and mother's maiden name and stuff like that, you don't appreciate somebody posting that information without your knowledge.
Yeah.
In Iceland, such information is not considered private information. It's considered public information, which is a totally different thing. And nobody would dream of using that information for identification purposes, which is why we can put the entire nation, every single person in the country on a web page showing how they are linked to everybody else without asking people. We are only publishing what is considered to be public information, but the same information is not necessarily considered public elsewhere. So, I mean, there's a bunch of reasons, legal and others, why we are doing things the way we are doing it.
So, did we answer the question of Heather about the database? Wasn't that we are able to reconnect with cousins, which you have lost? So what is the email if people want to send a question to
right now during this COVID thing, it is a bit difficult.
Okay.
Because there are only 2 people working on the project full time, and they are both working from home, so they don't have access to all the records and so on. We are at the moment basically just keeping things running. We are adding new people as every month as they are born. We get and as they die, and they are going through obituaries in the newspapers and so on. But we are somewhat limited in what we can do. If people contact me directly, I try to help them. Sure, not a problem.
Okay. I also know that Vesturfarasetur, or the Icelandic Immigration Center in Hofsós to the northwest of Iceland, they are also helping some people. So they have records of people moving to Canada and US, and I know they have been also helping people. So yeah, you have that option. You can check out Vesturfarasetur, the Icelandic Immigration Center. I just posted the link to their page on the comment. And as Friðrik was saying, there are just 2 people working on the database, like uploading new information about babies born and looking through records and stuff like that. So they are not very, maybe not in the best position because of COVID to answer questions, but as
I said, I try to answer stuff. There are also 2 Icelandic Facebook groups which welcome questions in English. Íslensk ættfræði. I mean, you can maybe find that and post a link to that.
Yes, I have it here. I'll post it right now.
If you are, for example, of partly Icelandic ancestry, and are interested in either finding relatives in Iceland or getting, or even things like just getting to know something about your ancestors, where they were from, why they emigrated, or whatever, then by all means go there and post, and somebody will help.
Yeah, I'm just posting it right now. Íslensk ættfræði or Icelandic genealogy. And I just posted the Facebook group for that, and just you need to ask to join up, and there you can ask away also. So you have at least these 3 options. You have the Immigration Center in Hofsós to the northwest. You have this Facebook group, and maybe if everything else fails, then you can maybe reach out to Friðrik and ask him if he has any extra information. But you can basically get you can get your maybe relatives in Iceland or people to look up into the database. As Friðrik was explaining earlier, it's because of legal issues that you can't basically open up the database to everybody. It needs to have a structure because as you said, this is information about a lot of personal information. So you're afraid that about lawsuits?
But regarding access to the database, basically you can either get access if you have a bank account in Iceland, in which case we can send you. Okay, let's put it differently. In order to get access to the database, you need to be in the database, which means that most people, like in the US or Canada, who had Icelandic ancestors maybe 3, 4, 5 generations back, are not in the database. So sorry, we cannot help you. We can answer your questions, but we cannot give you database access. For those who are in the database, you need to either have, if you have an Icelandic bank account, you can get access information sent to your home banking account, or if you have electronic, what do you call the rafrænu skilríkin?
Electronic ID or something like that. Like
then you can use that to get access as well. And if you get access, once you go in, you will be able to look at yourself, your ancestors and descendants, of course, and your close relatives. Close relatives in our case is we choose to define it as somebody that you share at least one great-grandparent with. And in addition, we allow people to look at anybody born before 1700 on the basis that information is older than that is probably not considered sensitive personal information. Even if your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was arrested for stealing a silver spoon. Well, that happened to one of my ancestors, but never mind.
Well, that's in the database because that's the only record that you have about this baby.
Yeah.
Maybe because of some theft or
the thing is,
or maybe just you were having an affair or something like that. You were punished for having an affair with a working lady or what?
The thing is, as I said, censuses and church records and so on go back to 1700 or so. Prior to that, you would basically only end up in the records if you were either rich and famous or notorious, or in some cases both. But things like being arrested for something, stealing a sheep, killing someone, stealing a spoon, or whatever, would get you into the permanent records. But if you were just a harmless farmer who lived in your little hut somewhere with a wife and a bunch of children and a few sheep and cows and whatever, then there wouldn't be any record of you today. Everything would be lost. Sorry. We only have information about 10% of the people living before, say, 1650. The nameless masses are the remaining 90%. They just disappear from the records. Interesting questions about cousins here. The thing is, if you pick 2 people in Iceland at random, like the 2 of us, and
I just posted here that we are related 7 generations back.
This is the average, basically. And this is kind of interesting. You can pick anyone, somebody who's in the news or famous for something or notorious for something, or someone who made the news for killing someone, or someone who made the news for winning an Oscar Prize or whatever, doesn't matter. We notice on the database that people will start looking up that person and checking how or if they are related to him or her.
Did you know about this Icelandic roots? I didn't know about this.
Yeah, that's different. It is US based. They don't have to follow the privacy law regulations, and it is US based. So they don't have to, as I said, operate under the same
restrictions that we have here in Iceland.
It's different. Also, it is to a large degree focused on people of Icelandic ancestry. We are focused on people in Iceland. We do have a lot of information on people of Icelandic ancestry living in Canada and the US, but it's not published on the web pages for legal reasons.
Mhm.
But that's the benefit of, but again, we have information on everybody. We allow us to publish information. This is a trade-off. You see, because we publish information on everybody, we are restricted to only publishing information on Icelanders. If we would only publish information on people that have explicitly given permission to be published, then we could include the Canadians and people from the US, but we would be opening up a big can of worms here in Iceland, which I'm not willing to do.
Yeah, one of the things that you told me that so we before 2008 to 2009 we had our own set of rules, like privacy rules, but genealogy was exempt from these rules because that was like public domain. But then
not public domain. The rule, the paragraph 2 of the law basically said personal information collected for the purposes of family history or genealogical activities is exempt from those rules. Mm-hmm. That's partly because this is kind of the national hobby. Mm-hmm. Then when Iceland applied to join the EU, we went into this process where we were adjusting our laws to become just like the EU laws. And we adopted the privacy laws from, well, what was essentially the German laws, or German/Belgium or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they are a lot more restricted, and they do not have this kind of exemption, and they do not have any 100-year limit or anything. So,
so for you, the people who are now, so we in Iceland, we are one of the few countries in Europe that isn't a part of the EU, the European Union. And after the crash here, 2008, we decided maybe it would be a good idea to drop the Icelandic krona, the small microcurrency that we have, and go for the euro and so forth. And so we started the application process to be part of the EU. And so we adopted a lot of laws and regulations from the EU to Iceland. And eventually we didn't go through with it, political reasons. Yeah. And well, it's debatable, Friðrik. But
Icelanders are rather split on this subject.
It's very split.
Don't bring it up in a bar or something if you're in Iceland, unless you want to get into really
if you want to get in a heated debate. But so we are still part of a lot of EU rules and regulations now today, and we still adopt a lot of EU regulations based on like a cooperation between EU and was it EES, the where Iceland, Norway, and
the English abbreviation would be EEA.
EEA, yeah, sorry.
European Economic Area.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just a short info about that.
There is another question from Heather, sorry, here. Does the Íslendingabók go forward?
Yeah. Here, are you talking about this one?
Yeah, I mentioned we had 2 people working full time, and one of the things they do is to enter basically anybody who is, well, just born, and we get monthly updates from the National Registry. So automatically, shortly after a baby is born, it gets included in the database. Mm-hmm. Now, here is where things get a little bit tricky. We only get information on one of the parents of the child.
Yes, only the mother.
No, only one parent. 99% of the cases, it's only the mother.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The problem is, it's fine if the parents are married or living together, but that's not always the case. And So in many cases, we don't know the father of the newborn babies. Like 20% of children are born to unmarried couples.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a problem. And there's a bit of gender discrimination in here. We are not allowed to ask the mother who the father of the baby is.
Mm.
On the other hand, if we have a single father, we are allowed to ask the father who the mother is.
Mm.
Well, that's never a secret.
Why is that? Why
That's never a secret. It's very hard to keep the mother out of the equation, right?
Yes, of course.
We are allowed to ask the child on his 18th or his or her 18th birthday.
Okay.
Now, of course, the parents are allowed to send us the information, but we are not allowed to ask.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
But this happens automatically. So to answer the question, the children go in more or less automatically connected to their mother, but and to the father as well, if the parents are living together. But if they are not living together, we may or may not get the father for years. And then
just for I was interested about that question also by Heather. How many generations should pass before it's okay to marry?
That's a question of genetics, really. I mean, it depends on how flawed your genes are. Basically, no, seriously.
Yeah.
For most genetic or most diseases with a genetic component, or even what is called a genetic disease, you are typically okay if you get a working okay gene from one parent. You only have real problems if you get a flawed gene from both parents.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because those flawed genes tend to run in families, the chances of bad mutations sort of accumulating is higher if both parents are genetically similar. That is, if they share many recent or many common ancestors, or if they are closely related, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you have a brother and sister, there's a fairly high chance of genetic defects.
Mm-hmm.
If you have cousins, it's half that. If you have second cousin, it's a quarter of the chances in case of brothers and sisters, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I must add that me and my wife are related only 10 generations back, which is way above average.
Yes.
But, yeah.
Me and mine is just 7, so that's the ordinary.
That's a typical. There was once an application, a phone app, a smartphone app, which allowed you to enter your ID into a database, and then you could touch the phone or bump the phone against the phone of someone else, and the phone would the app would basically tell you if you were, let's say, too closely related or not.
Yes. So this was like this was pre-Tinder in Iceland. So you just bump your phones together, like at the bar. Are we too close?
For well, I guess for pickup purposes or whatever.
Obviously, it was designed by university students, right?
Oh yes, oh yes.
So, yeah. So this was an app that was going on for quite some time and made the news around the world about the dating app of Icelanders, where you basically bump your phones together to see how closely, if it's okay to go home together.
Yeah, and bumping in bed. Never mind. This is no longer updated or maintained.
No, but I was checking it before this chat if I could show it to the people, but unfortunately, for some reason this was discontinued.
Yeah, but we also used to have a Facebook app where you could check how closely related you were to all your Facebook friends, provided that they had given their full name and date of birth to Facebook.
Okay.
Then a few years ago, Facebook basically closed access to that kind of information.
Okay.
Privacy, data mining, or whatever. So that's no longer possible.
Okay. I didn't know about that. Was that on behalf of Íslendingabók or
It was an official Íslendingabók Facebook app. Yeah.
Okay. Don't remember to use that.
The smartphone app wasn't from us really. I mean, we sponsored the competition, and I think we gave them some prize for the best implementation of this. But
so there was an official competition.
There was a competition for writing the best smartphone Íslendingabók app. Yes.
Okay, so it was held in the university, just for the software engineers. Make a.
The part of using it primarily for compatibility checking, or whatever you want to call it, was not a part of the original specification.
No. Okay. Interesting, but I didn't know it was a part of company. I thought it was just a couple of university students that wanna.
This was an official competition.
Yeah, but I just want to talk a little bit about deCODE, because they are very one of the most forefront companies in basically tracing good genes and bad genes, and what causes diseases and whatnot. They've been very in the forefront now. For example, helping the government with COVID. For example, they have been testing out, doing tests for the government, like for if people have COVID or not, so your partnership with them, do you work with them?
Basically, the system is set up in a way that they funded the data entry and the required software development.
Yeah.
I provided my library, which is one of the best in Iceland, and overall direction, and the housing for the employees. I mean, when we had 20 to 30 people, I just took one part of the office, my office building for that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a reasonably big software company at that time.
Yeah.
Then when we got the database, the current arrangement is basically that they have exclusive rights to use the database for any medical or genetics related tasks.
Inquiries.
I have the exclusive right to use it to provide any kind of genealogy service. I mean, I have been kind of toying with the idea of offering people to get a printed document of their ancestors going back to the settlement age, or all the descendants of great-great-great-grandfather, or offering services not free but reasonably priced to, say, people of Icelandic ancestry to basically get their family trees and get the information about living relatives in Iceland and so on.
I think it's a no-brainer. I think
it's as I said, I have the permission to do that. I'm not decided to do that. I may do that at some point if there's interest, but currently we are just working on the database and filling in the rest of the blanks.
Yeah. So deCODE, they can basically they go into the database, they have so they do it with
well, here's where it gets complicated. There are really three different databases. There is this underlying big database.
Mm-hmm.
From that, you basically extract two different views of the database. One view has all the personal information removed, exact dates of birth, names, anything. You have the relationship between individuals and so on, but that's it. You are not supposed to be able to easily go back and find out who is who. Mm-hmm. And this database is then linked to their genetics data. Mm-hmm. They get samples for various research projects from a whole lot. I mean, I think they have something like 1/3 of the whole population. And those are linked together, and that's what they use in their genetics research. And there, well, let me get back to that later. On the other hand, there is a database that is extracted with the genealogy information, which is put on the web. Now, there are interesting differences. For example, regarding adoptions. An individual that is adopted has, for example, 2 different sets of parents, or may have the blood parents or genetic donors, and he may have the adoptive parents. On the web page, we will typically show the adoptive parents, unless we are specifically requested to not to do that. On the genetics database, people on that side, they have no interest in anything like adoptions and so on. They're only interested in the actual transfer of genes between generations. So we are working with different sets. Now, here is, as I said, where it gets really, really interestingly unusual. Let's say that they have what they call a triple. That is, they have a sample of blood from an individual and his or her parents, 3 individuals. And sometimes, occasionally, you get the interesting result that the official father of the individual just cannot be the biological father. What is known politely as a non-paternal event. Basically, somebody was cheating on somebody with somebody else, but never mind. Yeah, well, that's the official name for it. The thing is, for, again, privacy reasons, that sample is classified as unusable. Like if it was stored at the wrong temperature, or if somebody dropped the bottle on the floor and broke it, or something, destroyed sample. So we know the total number of unusable or destroyed samples, but we don't know how many of them are what we call non-paternity events. But the interesting thing is that the number is really low. It's maybe 1 or 2%.
Okay.
Now, that is, interestingly enough, extremely unusual. It's similar to what you get in some of the Muslim countries. In like Sweden or Norway, it's more like 5%, 1 in 20 children. In the US, it is surprisingly common, even today, for the oldest child in a group of children to have a different biological father than the rest of the children. In the UK, in certain cities, I'm not mentioning any specific places, but certain cities, it gets as high as 20%. 1 in 5 children. Must be really fun to be a milkman in those towns, but never mind. The point is, Kári is not what you would call a politically correct person.
No, he's not.
But he basically said, either Icelandic women are not as loose as everybody thinks, or they just keep better records. The thing is, from the point of view of Icelanders, it's really not a big deal if in the same family you have his children, her children, and their children.
Yeah, we are not as ashamed by it as probably many nations. Yeah, you have 3 children with 3 different wives. That's it's a pretty. Yeah. And but basically, the interesting thing about this from a genealogy perspective is that if things have been like that in Iceland, then there is a good reason to actually think this is the case. Written genealogy records are reasonably accurate on the paternal side. The maternal side, of course, is
pretty much reliable. There is only one single documented case in the entire history of Iceland of what we would call a non-maternity event.
Okay.
When the official mother is, okay, before egg donations and so on. But in the old times, only a single event when the wrong woman was the mother of a child.
What, can you tell me the story about that?
Oh yeah. 1830 something. There was a small farm, just 3 people living there. Husband, okay, 3 adults. Husband, wife, and 1 young female worker. I think you can guess what happened next. The husband got the worker pregnant. Now, by itself, it was not a big deal, except that this was the 3rd time he did something like that. And the punishment for a 3rd offense, I mean, this was a criminal offense, punishment for a 3rd offense was lifetime imprisonment, hard labor in Brimarholmur, which is, well, basically in Denmark.
A Danish prison. So just for you people out there, we were a Danish colony at the time, and for some reason in Lutheran times there were really strict laws against all kinds of things, especially 16th, 17th, 18th century. We had witchcraft burnings, and if you had children out of wedlock, like he was telling you about, like if you did it the 3rd time, you would pay a fine for the first 2 children, but if you did it the 3rd time, you would be.
The problem was, from the wife's perspective, that she couldn't afford to lose the head of the household. I mean, she would be ended up destitute. So what happened was that the worker,
at the time, women couldn't own a farm. Basically, that
well,
was like,
yeah, they could own it, but they probably didn't own the farm where they lived. They were just tenants.
yes.
And what would happen if she was left alone with some children, and who would hire her? What would she do? I mean, as long as they were tenants on the farm and paid their taxes, they had a place to live and a roof over their head.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't want to lose that. So what happened was that officially the worker, farm worker, was sick, and she stayed at home. The wife went to church regularly. I mean, everybody did go to church back then. It's not like it's today, but anybody would go to church once a week, and she went there and added some pillows or something underneath her dress, so she would appear to be more and more pregnant. Then finally the time came where the farm worker gave birth to the baby at home, and the housewife took the baby to church to have it baptized as her child. Everybody happy, nobody had to pay a fine. Yes. Or get sent to Brimarholmur for hard labor for the rest of his life. This was actually discovered later, but by that time it didn't really matter because the laws had been changed. There was this law book called Stóridómur, which was basically struck down and replaced with more reasonable, less harsh laws.
Yeah.
So,
there were many really strange laws in this Stóridómur, or the Big Judgments. Can you imagine a book of laws called Big Judgment? Very. We
had a bunch of strange laws. I mean, it was until recently where it was legal to just kill foreign Basque whalers on sight.
Yeah, just by Basques. You could kill Spanish Basques if they arrived on Iceland. You could kill them without punity. That was like in Icelandic laws, because for some reason we had a beef with them in what was it, 18th century, 17th century?
No, 1600 something. A bunch of them got shipwrecked and they stole some sheep, and the locals hunted them down and killed them, and put a law and had a law put in the book basically saying it's okay to kill those guys if they ever show up again.
Yes. Yes, sometimes. So I was just for fun, I was just looking up Ingólfur Arnarsson, the first settler of Iceland, according to the the books, Book of Settlement and Íslendingabók, the book of Icelanders, which depict the story of the settlers of Iceland. So you can basically say Ingólfur Arnarson, his wife Hallveig Fróðadóttir, and then we can trace back our trace it back here from around 31 generations, and then Valur arrives. So it's just it's a fun thing to have. But all Icelanders can basically trace back their ancestry to, Ingólfur, basically, right?
Yeah. Basically, anybody alive before, say, 1300 is either the ancestor of everybody today, or nobody can trace their ancestry back to him or her.
Mm-hmm.
The reason has to do with there's a kind of a bottleneck in the data between 1250 and 1400.
Mm-hmm.
Very few lines that go back there. And
yeah, just to tell, so we were a Norwegian colony from 1263. So that's one of the reasons why maybe we didn't have we were not as active in registering our ancestry or genealogy from what 13th century.
From then till we basically had to do it again for inheritance purposes after the Black Death.
After Black Death, yeah.
And but there is a small gap there, and of course, then in modern or later times we have pretty good records, but there are some gaps. And actually, so one of the biggest remaining gaps is the what you could call small farmers of the 18th century, the 1700s, because there you have records, but they are inaccessible. They are probate books, basically how the properties were divided up after his or her death. There are lists of farmers and various inaccessible records, and the data is there. It just takes a whole lot of time to extract them. And right now I'm working my way through farmer censuses from 1820 to 1865, just to extract whatever can be extracted and then put into a big database.
So for those of you people that are having their hobby doing Netflix binging or whatever, Friðrik, he is looking at farmers' census from 1820 to 1860 just to add to the database. That's your hobby, right?
One of my hobbies.
Yes. I'm just joking with you. So I think this has just been excellent. I think we have answered a lot of questions. I got some great things that I need to look up in the history books. Just for my, I'm a history nerd also. Just these ideas of the farmers and the 5,000 farms and 10 people and that angle I hadn't thought about that. That was a really nice twist. I know that you're asking for people that have access to the database to upload photos to the database, right?
That's another thing. I mean, one thing we would really love to have are photos of the emigrants, the people that left Iceland maybe as children in the late 1800s, and quite likely got their photos taken at some point in the US or Canada, and we would really love to have that in a database. So if you have a question, okay, let's put it this way. If some of you are of Icelandic ancestry and would like to know something either about your ancestors or current relatives in Iceland, we are more than willing to help. The only thing we will ask for, I mean, we are not offering any services for money or anything like that, it's all free, but you would make us really happy if you can share some photos of people, just as long as those people are no longer alive. That's, again, I have to draw, I don't want anybody except the individuals in question to actually send us pictures of people that are still alive. But the immigrants themselves, if you have them, photos of them, I would love to get them. And again, if you have questions, feel free to contact us at the easiest way is just the Facebook pages, either the Íslendingabók Facebook page or the Icelandic Genealogy Facebook page.
Are you talking about the group or now, or
the group?
The group, yeah.
Just join the group and post your questions. Don't hesitate to post them in English if you want. I mean, there are people there, not only myself but several others, that absolutely love solving puzzles, and as long as it's not my great-great-grandfather was named Jón Jónsson, was from Iceland.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a very common name in Iceland, Jón Jónsson. So it's a difficult thing to trace, and that's one of the key things that people are sometimes think, why don't you have family names? Doesn't make it hard for you to trace back your ancestry? No, it makes it easier, because I'm the son of Sævar. Sævar is the son of Jón. Jón is the son of so forth and so on. So it makes it easier for us to trace back our at least if all the parenting is right. So takk fyrir þetta, Friðrik. This has been great.
Hope you enjoyed it, all of you.
And yeah, I would love if you have any updates or something like that, something that you would please reach out and tell me if there's anything that we can put a spotlight on, then don't be shy in reaching out. Takk fyrir mig. Bless.